This time I'd like to call to order the July 25th, 2024 business meeting of the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission. And I'd like to state that this meeting is being streamed live and recorded as a public record. A recording of the meeting will be available at www.ncwildlife.org. As a courtesy to others, please turn off all cell phones during the meeting. This time, if you would please rise and join me in saying the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible.
This time, I'd like to recognize Commissioner John Alexander to return our invitation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. From Genesis 1. And God said, let the water teem with living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the vault of the sky. So God created great creatures of the sea, every living thing with which the water teems and that moves about in it, according to their kinds. And every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. God blessed it, said, be fruitful and increase in number, and fill the water in the seas, and let the birds increase on the earth. And there was evening, and there was morning, the fifth day. And God said, let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds, the livestock, the creatures that move along the ground, and the wild animals, each according to its kind. And it was so. God made the wild animals according to their kinds, the livestock according to their kinds, and all the creatures that move along the ground according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule the fish in the seas and the birds in the skies, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. Please pray with me. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the bountiful plants and animals that you have blessed us with. We pray for your guidance as we do our job to care for them according to your will. And it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Commissioner. This time I recognize Margaret Winkler for roll call. Commissioner President, Margaret.
Do a roll call for July 25th, 2024 meeting. Lonnie Crump.
Here.
Mark Craig.
Here.
David Hoyle.
Here.
John Coley.
Here.
Wes Seegers.
Here.
Tommy Bumble.
Here.
Tom Berry.
Here.
Brad Stanback.
Here.
Jim Ruffin.
Here.
Ray Clifton.
Here.
Kelly Davis. Here. Steve Wyndham. Landon Zimmer.
Here.
John Stone.
Here.
Aiden Rogers.
Here.
John Alexander.
Here.
Tom Hayslip.
Here.
J.C. Cole.
Here.
Mike Alford.
Here.
Joe Budd. Reed Smith.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a point.
Thank you, Margot. North Carolina General Statute 138A-15 mandates that the commission chair shall remind all commissioners of their duty to avoid conflicts of interest and appearances of conflict under this chapter. And that the chair also inquires as to whether there is any known conflict of interest or appearance of conflict with respect to any matters coming before the commission at this time. It's the duty of each commissioner who is aware of such personal conflict of interest or an appearance of conflict to notify the chair of the same. At this time, I'll ask for any recusal for any items of business coming before the commission today. Hearing none, we'll move forward. And at this time, I'll recognize Margot Winkler to deliver a state ethics commission review. Commissioner Abrams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We received the State Ethics Commission evaluation of the statement of economic interest filed by Commissioner Hayden Rogers. They did not find an actual conflict of interest, but found a potential for a conflict of interest. The potential conflict identified does not prohibit service on this entity. Mr. Rogers is a partner of Integrated Strategy Group and owns Bedrock Strategies, LLC. As such, he has the potential for a conflict of interest and should exercise appropriate caution in the performance of his public duties. Should issues involving these entities or their clients come before the commission for the distraction. The evaluation is 2024 statement.
Thank you, Margot. And we'll move forward with the agenda. Consideration of approving June 6, 2024 minute meetings, which are exhibit A in the packet. Are there any additions, changes, or corrections to the June 6th? Make a motion to approve. Got a motion to approve. Second, got a motion to second to approve the minutes of the June 6th meeting. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed? For adopted. This time, I'd like to recognize Jason Todd, Chief Financial Officer, to give a financial status report. Jason, floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll begin with Exhibit B, as we always do, with a year-to-date overview of our revenues and expenditures, excuse me, in both our general fund and capital improvement funds. As of June 30 of 2024, total revenues in our general fund category were $182,592,274.11. Total expenditures in the same were $168,661,078, leaving an overall fund balance as of June 30 of $35,145,577.43. In our capital improvement category as of June 30, our total revenues were $11,071,815.20. Total expenditures in the same were $4,404,172.25. Before I move on to the endowment fund, I want to cover just a second over this $35 million fund balance as of June 30. It would be easy, for an outside observer to see that $35 million fund balance and make the assumption that WRC is flush with cash and has no concerns. So I think it's important to highlight the fact that just as we did last month with our expendable income balance, much of that fund balance is obligated, whether statutorily or through partnerships with external entities. And I'll give just a couple of examples, and I apologize, I don't have a visual slide for this. But of that 35 million, 10 million is obligated for the Outfall Canal Mattamuskeet project. More than 2 million is earmarked for grants for the Youth Outdoor Engagement Commission. 6 million of that is in our vessel registration balance, which is restricted not just statutorily, but of course we transfer roughly 50% of that quarterly to DEQ, as was mentioned yesterday. So of that $35 million, once we factor in all the asterisks, all the either encumbered, obligated, or restricted funds, it's really only about 8 million that's readily available for WRC use. Now, those kind of reserves are sufficient because of the cyclical nature of our revenues, but it's a far cry from that 35 million. So I just think it's important to keep that cash balance in the context of our obligations. Moving on to the endowment fund as of June 30, overall fund balance is now $192,729,932.90. And that asset allocation is represented by roughly 15.5% in our short-term investment fund, and just about 85% in our equities at 163 million and 29 million. As we did last time, I want to again highlight our expendable income balance, which has now reached 67 million. But as we did before, mentioned that roughly 30 million of that is what's remaining and unobligated. We've talked about these before, Setzer Hatchery, Samarkand, and a few other repair and renovation projects. But again, what appears, 67 million is in fact only about 30 once we factor in our non-obligations. Are there any questions?
Anyone have any questions? Hearing none.
Hearing none, that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Good job. Thank you for the explanation on fund balance. With this time, I move forward with the agenda of the committee report. And I recognize Chairman David Hoyle to provide a committee report on the ad hoc agency supplemental funding model committee.
The ad hoc committee to assess the agency supplemental funding model met July 24th, 2024 at 9 a.m. After reviewing the committee's charge, staff provided an overview of the assessment process and presented the following supplemental funding proposals for the committee's consideration. First one, a non-motorized vessel permit for self-powered vessels in state waters. Number two, a conservation path be required for non-licensed individuals to access and use certain WRC game lands and shooting ranges. And number three, a conservation membership program to provide a donation pathway for the public to support the agency's conservation mission. It was noted that these proposals address activities that the Wildlife Resource Commission currently supports. The assessment concluded that each proposal stands to increase both revenue and the agency's constituency base in fulfillment of the committee's charge. The ad hoc committee recommended to the staff pursue the implementation of all three options. There being no further business, the committee adjourns.
Are there any questions or comments on the Board of the Ad hoc Agency Supplemental Funding Model Committee? I think a lot of good things have come out of that. Appreciate our staff work, Amy, Sheriff, all you all did a good job. Spent last year reviewing that. I think it came forward with some very solid assessment proposals moving forward to supplement the funding model of the Oklahoma Wildlife Resources Commission in the near term and the long term. And at this time, I would like to recognize Voting Safety Committee Chair J.C. Cole to provide your report.
Good morning. The Voting Safety Committee met yesterday, July 24. Betsy Haywood, our no wait zone coordinator, walked the committee through a permanent rulemaking adoption for Pender County, permanent rulemaking notice of text for Brunswick, Carteret, Alexander, and Mecklenburg and Gaston counties, and emergency, temporary, and permanent rulemaking for Bladen County to address safety concerns at White Lake. Major Mark Dutton then provided a brief but impressive update of our law enforcement division's efforts for the July 4 Operation Dry Water efforts to reduce boating while impaired. There being no further business, the committee adjourned. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Are there any further questions for Voting Safety Committee? We've got a lot of actions to deal with that later on the agenda. Here, no questions. I'll move forward to Land Acquisition Property Committee. Chairman Tom Berry.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Land Acquisition Property Committee met yesterday at 10:30. And I have to comment, we're notorious for having long meetings, but we did this within 15 minutes. And with much chagrin, I really wanted to expand on several of these projects, but we didn't. The Land Acquisition Property Committee reviewed and approved 3 phase 1 land acquisition proposal and 1 phase 2. Committee adjourned, duly noted at 10:45. Now, I will say on one of these projects, it's an $8 million acquisition that we've ended up working. Our staff has worked hard and our funding partners have worked hard. We're going to end up only paying probably $1.2, $1.3 million for this tract. I think we need to, when it comes up and Ben goes over, duly note that. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. That concludes my report.
Any questions, comments? Good work on the duration of the meeting. At this time, I will recognize Small and Game Wild Turkey Committee Chair, Jim Ruff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Small Game and Wild Turkey Committee met yesterday and had an excellent meeting with a very informative agenda. Upland Game bird biologist Hannah Plumpton gave an excellent presentation covering a review of the agency's wild turkey data and management. Hannah focused on a number of harvest statistics and the various surveys staff use to monitor the status of our turkey population. Hannah discussed next steps for our turkey management, including a survey of turkey hunters. Chris Turner, our supervisor over Game Bird and Wildlife Health Program, gave us a great presentation on many of the ways we monitor small game populations in the state and what the results of the different surveys mean for our small game populations and management. Chris Craig presented the committee with staff's recommendation to revise the wild turkey management goal for the commission to better address the status of our turkey management and potential future actions. After discussion, the committee voted in favor of the new goal. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion from the committee to approve the new goal, which is to provide quality spring gobbler hunting opportunities by conserving North Carolina's wild turkey.
You have a motion to change to that new station, a mission statement. Is there a second? A second from Commissioner Hoffer. Is there any further discussion and deliberation? Motion. Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion to change the mission statement of our wild turkey program, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With no further business, the committee adjourned.
Thank you. Fisheries Committee Chair, John Stone, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman John Stone presented the committee with information on potential trophy trout management based on and supported by the fisheries staff's white paper on trophy trout waters. After substantial, robust discussion, The committee passed a motion to direct fisheries staff to invest options in implementing trophy trout management and report back to the committee with a recommended approach. Kevin Dockendorf, Coastal Fisheries Research Coordinator, then presented ongoing work to understand an often overlooked sunfish species, the flyer. He shared how the flyer is mainly distributed in swampy backwater areas of coastal plain, and that staff were learning more about this species throughout the state. The committee viewed a clip from a Carolina all outdoor episode on flyers. Full show can be seen on the commission's website at www.ncwildlife.com. Topics of municipal lake fishing, hidden gems for largemouth bass, and an update on ongoing species management plans were postponed due to time constraints. There were no additional topics. The meeting adjourned at 2:42 p.m. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my report.
Are there any comments or questions on the Fisheries Committee report? I think it was thoroughly vetted and discussed yesterday. I've been surprised. Thank you for that, Mr. Chairman. I'll now give the report of Committee of the Whole. Committee of the Whole met yesterday afternoon and started with a brief presentation from the North Carolina Wildlife Federation's Mandy Fuller, who talked about their initiative, One Mission, One Commission. Melba Bonner presented rulemaking notice of text for rules requiring action under periodic review of rules. Next, she presented permanent rulemaking adopting when endangered, threatened, special species concern, land and water access, 24-25 deer season companion rules, commercial use permitting and temporary rules for the Need More Game Land. Inland Fisheries Division Chief Christian Waters presented the public comments for temporary rulemaking, closed flounder season for 2024. After consideration of all these comments and a lot of good discussion, view of the data recently presented to the Marine Fisheries Commission, committee determined closure of the flounder season for 2024 as an unbalanced allocation issue. That data suggested that closing the season was necessary as a conservation issue. MFC would also close the commercial season as well. Committee therefore recommended a 4-day season as recommended by staff and reviewed and vetted by Committee of the Whole. Lastly, I reviewed the updated agency organization overview and commissioner orientation package. It reminded commissioners of Executive Orders 34 and 65 and assigned acknowledgement form outlining the requirements, expectations, packets. We went over several portions of the code of conduct, one related to harassment. I just wanted to state that harassment of any form, sexual, whatever the circumstances of harassment, would not be tolerated by the commission, and appropriate actions and investigations occur in the event any of those issues occur in the future. And we did highlight that portion yesterday, and I wanted to reiterate that today as well. Are there any questions, comment about the report from Committee of the Whole? If not, I will move forward. You have the report of the executive. The executive committee met yesterday afternoon and went into closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143, 318, 11, 83, and 86. One was for attorney-client privilege to discuss ongoing litigation, and the other was under personnel, A6, where we did an annual review of the executive director Cam Ingram's job performance. During that meeting, we went over goals that the commission had set last year, where those goals are now, and looking forward to what the future held for goals and objectives that we had. The commission has brought forward through the committees and from the commissioners. After no further business, the meeting was adjourned. If anyone has any comments or questions about that, any of those items that was discussed, please see me after the meeting. But obviously, as you can, no surprise, Cam received a good evaluation, of course. Thanks for a job well done. As always, Cam credits his staff, the team. If he'll be here, he'll tell you the same thing. And we've got a great team in place. He reiterated that and accomplishments and how this committee, what has been done over the last year. When you look at July of last year, we were going to a new IT platform. We moved right forward, moved forward quickly with SAMRCAN. We've got groundwork done to do the sensor hatchery, on a lot of things. It's just a short list, major items that have been accomplished over the last year. And again, he highlighted the teamwork, what he gets from his staff and the commission. I relay that on this. At this time, we'll move forward to our agency spotlight. And I'll introduce, call on Carrie Rubin to introduce our speaker, agency spotlight, billions and benefits, value in fish and wildlife management.
Today's spotlight presenter is Christina Watkins. Christina is our lead social scientist here at the agency. She's been with us for 3 years now, but has spent her career conducting applied human dimensions research for wildlife and fisheries, not only here, but also in Tennessee and Virginia. A lot of what Christina has been focusing on over the past about year and a half, in addition to her general projects, has been conducting economic research for our use in decision-making to help make the case for wildlife and work that we do. So today, she's going to tell you a bit about that work and how important wildlife is to North Carolina in dollars.
Thank you, Carrie, for that introduction. So like Carrie mentioned, I'm going to be talking today about the economic impact analysis. This is one tool that we use as an agency to measure the impact of the work that we do in managing and conserving fish and wildlife across the state, as well as providing outdoor recreation opportunities. So you might have seen headlines in the news boasting about the economic impact of an event, like the NFL draft, examples up here, an attraction like the Western North Carolina Nature Center, or an industry like tourism in Pennsylvania or craft brewing in Iowa. You may also have seen some recent headlines about the economic impact of the outdoor recreation industry and the outdoor recreation economy. If you have never, if you've ever been curious about any of these types of studies and you're wondering how these studies get conducted and why they get conducted and how this data is used, you're in luck because that's what I'll be presenting on today. First, I want to talk about the why. So you've seen those headlines, but how can that information be used for wildlife? And more importantly, why is it valuable? Among others, there are 4 main reasons. These studies can tell you about the impact of the work that we do as an agency, and they can help to measure the return on investment of that work, either whether that's to the economy or in public utility. They can also help assess the value that the public places on fish and wildlife conservation, as well as agency programming. Lastly, it helps with planning for the future. One of the things that these studies can tell us is the public demand for our programming. So that helps us to ensure whether that we are allocating enough resources to meet demand of the citizens that we provide. So these studies are called economic impact analyses, and they measure the impact of a project, program, or policy on the economy of a specified region, whether it's locally, regionally, statewide, or nationally. It's a type of in-depth analysis that measures the ripples of an economic activity throughout the economy. It can help organizations understand the direct and indirect effects of businesses, public policy, and investments in local, regional, or national economies. It tells you whether the impact, it tells you about the impact of direct expenditures, the number of jobs supported, associated tax revenue, and overall economic impacts. So I mentioned some of those news clippings earlier, but I wanted to provide an example that hit a little bit closer to home. I'm sure you've seen these national statistics from the 2022 survey of fishing, hunting, and wildlife associated recreation. This study was conducted by the Fish and Wildlife Service in partnership with several states in the U.S. And it's an example of an economic impact analysis and their findings that really bring home the economic importance of hunting, fishing, and wildlife associated recreation. So I'm sure you may have seen these before, but summarizing some of the data up here, the impact of these activities across the nation is around $395 billion. And that is split out between hunting, fishing, and wildlife. Those numbers have a large impact based on the number of people that participate in those activities. So as you can see on the left, there's about 14 million hunters across the U.S., around 40 million anglers, 150 million wildlife watchers, and around 50 million owners. So I want to briefly talk about how we do these kinds of studies here at the agency. So the impacts of wildlife and fisheries related activities can be measured by the direct, indirect, and induced effects of an activity related expenditures. So if you think of yourself as a hunter or the average hunter out there, you must be aware of all the different products and things you have to purchase in order to pursue your activities. And they vary in quality and cost, but if you are a hunter, you're buying any number of items, whether it's equipment like binoculars or hunting knives or shoes, as well as trip-related expenditures, like the sodas that you buy on the way to your game land or private land. the gas you use to fill up your car. All of these purchases are the impact that you as a consumer, as a user of these activities, that you pay to enjoy in these. But it goes beyond that economic activity. When you think about the indirect effects. So the shoes that you buy come from a store that employs workers. They're made in a factory. Those products have to be shipped around the country, around the state. And there's a lot of those indirect impacts that come from that purchase, as well as the induced effects. So thinking beyond that, those employees that work at the shoe store, they go to the movie theater and they spend money there. They go to the gas station. They live in a society and a community that all has an economy of its own. And so when you're looking at the purchase, of a hunting knife, you think it might be $20. That $20 has a much broader reach. So here at the WRC, we get this information by sending out surveys. You may have received a survey in the mail from us in the last few years. And if you have, I want to take this up to personally thank you for filling that out and sending it back to us. Without this information from the public and our constituents, we wouldn't be able to conduct these research. So in these surveys, we ask about individuals' equipment and trip-related expenditures on a certain activity in the last 12 months. We also ask about the number of trips that they took, the days they spent doing that activity, and the number of people they paid for. From there, we're typically able to estimate the participation rates of this activity, the number of people that participate in hunting or fishing and all these activities. But we also can get information from outside sources. When it comes to, dove hunting and other activities, we have numbers and others. Lastly, we feed all of this data into an input-output model that estimates the impacts of those expenditures throughout the economy. Typically, we do statewide studies, but we can also look at regional impacts. So before I get into the fun numbers and the results, I did want to briefly mention that all of this is kind of possible due to the dedication of the staff of the WRC. These analyses are just one way that we measure the impact of the work that we do across the agency, managing and conserving fish and wildlife and providing recreational opportunities. So that being said, we conducted a study last year, which you have all seen before. If you haven't, we're able to provide any of these infographics or reports when you're interested. So I briefly want to cover some of the results from these studies. So we did a study last year looking at the economic impact of hunting, fishing, and wildlife watching within the state of North Carolina. And this was a survey that we sent out to the general public, so not necessarily our constituents, but anyone in the state. And we found that there's about 300,000 hunters in North Carolina. So that's about 3% of the population. Those hunters are spending around $800 million when it comes to their hunting pursuits in the state. And that has an overall economic impact of $1 billion. Again, there's a lot more information we got in these studies, but I'm just going to breeze through these. In the study, we were able to look a bit more at different aspects of hunting. So we were able to look at turkey hunting in North Carolina. That had about 76,000 hunters who spent or had an economic impact of around $123 million. It's cut off here in the middle, but this is deer hunting in the middle specifically. Had an economic impact of $732 million, and that was around 240,000 hunters. And then lastly, we were able to look at small game hunting, and that had an economic impact of around $215 million with 106,000 hunters participating in that. Looking at inland fishing, we were able to find that there are about 1.2 million anglers in North Carolina, which makes up 11% of the state's population. So a lot of folks go fishing in the state. And all those folks spent around $3.9 billion in these pursuits, whether that's fishing rods, tackle, gas stations, all those sorts of things. And that had an economic impact of $5.8 billion. In a separate study, we were able to look specifically at trout fishing. And this study was, it was a survey that we sent out to our constituents, so folks that have a fishing license that allows them to fish in North Carolina. And from that survey, we found that around 370,000 people fished for trout in 2022. And that is about 26% of all of those anglers. So all of those trout anglers spend around $1 billion in the state, and that has an overall economic impact of $1.38 billion. And that is across the state. And I will also mention that about 13% of those 370,000 anglers do come from out of state. So there's quite a bit of this. We also took a look at recreational boating in the past year. We sent out a survey to folks with registered vessels with the agency to ask about their expenditures and their preferred activities. We kind of broke that out between folks that use their vessels for fishing and folks that use their vessels for general recreational cruising. From that, you can see in this pie chart over to the right that it's about evenly split. About 47% of folks use their vessels for fishing, while 48% use it for general boating, and about 3% said they use vessels for hunting. So looking at that data, we were able to see that fishing from a vessel has an economic impact of around $2.8 billion, while fishing or while cruising recreationally has around $2.7 billion. From the study, we're also able to see that 76% of boat owners who fish prefer to go freshwater fishing, and 64% of boaters use our agency NCWRC boating access areas in order to access them. This is our most recent study that I don't think anyone has seen results from yet. We sent a survey out to folks that have non-resident hunting and fishing licenses. So these are the licenses you can see here in bold. We sent out a survey to folks that have these types of licenses. And using that in our license sales data, we found that of all of our non-resident hunting and fishing licenses, about 24% of those folks are hunters and 76% are anglers. So that means that there are 26,574 out-of-state hunters and 84,783 out-of-state anglers. This was in 2020. And the expenditures made by those hunters and anglers had an impact of $32.2 million for hunting and $121.4 million for fishing. And I will just mention that this is all non-resident anglers, folks that are earning their incomes in another state and bringing that, choosing to spend their money. Back to that study I mentioned earlier, looking at wildlife watching. You might see that this is a pretty large economic impact, and that has a lot to do with the number of people that participate in wildlife watching. Which we defined here as people that intentionally observe, photograph, or feed wildlife around the home, or specifically leave their homes to view wildlife. Of those folks, there's about 2.9 million of those wildlife watchers in the state, which means that about 27% of North Carolina's population pursues wildlife watching. And those expenditures within the state led to an economic impact of $7.5 billion. I'll end with this example, which is a study that we are starting to delve into more than broadly looking at our hunters and anglers, looking at specific facets of the work that we do as an agency. So we recently looked at folks that participate in baiting and feeding wildlife across the state. We sent out a survey to our hunters to ask who's out there putting food on the landscape, for what purpose, and how much are they spending when they do so. So hunters across the state are putting around 236 million pounds of food, which you'll learn from their last presentation at the last meeting. It's mostly corn, potatoes, things like that. And hunters spent around $51 million on food for deer and $16 million on food for bear. All of those expenditures had an economic impact of $97.9 million. So I want to start wrapping this up with a small explanation of how we use this data. And it's really used for making the case for wildlife, whether that's for funding. We've used in funding requests. Here I have an example of a study that we looked at as part of that trout study, looking specifically at the Bobby Setzer fish hatchery to see the economic impact of that trout that they use. I believe that was used in order to request for funding. It's been used in other ways to get funding for the agency. It's been used for program planning. Knowing the number of participants helps us to ensure that we are doing things like stocking enough fish, providing sufficient programming, and dedicating enough resources to meet the demand. It's also been used in informing partners As a state agency, we can help our partners across the state, other agencies and news organizations to quantify the impact for these. And lastly, it's used to determine public support for fish, for wildlife, for the work that we do, and the overall value of conservation. So I wanted to end on this note. I tallied up some of the findings from the studies that I've been talking about. And when you add it all together, you can see that the value of fisheries and wildlife management and conservation work conducted by the agency, shown through the activities that we regulate, brings an economic impact of $20.4 billion to the state. And really, this is an undervaluation. We've just begun to scratch the surface of identifying the agency's impact. And there's a lot of work that we do that is not captured by these numbers. Thankfully, I'm one member of a great team at this agency that's going to continue to expand on these studies and try to get a better understanding of the value that we bring. So I'll leave you all with that, and I'll take any questions if anyone has any.
You want to have a question? There we go, Brian.
I noticed one of your earlier graphics had an icon of a hospital. Does that imply if someone is injured in a fishing act, boating accident, that their hospital care is a positive economic impact?
Get it, but yes, I guess that could be one way. It also looks at, the folks, that are employed at that shoe shop and doctor. Basically, that was kind of showing that we kind of exist in communities, and all of the economic activity that we do trickles out into various aspects of the community that gets built because people have
Give comparative data for like contiguous states, Virginia or South Carolina. Do you have any idea how our economic impact per capita versus those states at all? I was curious.
The Fish and Wildlife Service in that study that I mentioned at the beginning, they did across the United States. They were not able to break it out individually by state, I believe. Only if the state bought into the study, which is why we ended up doing our own. So I'm not sure if they have that data, and I'm not sure if each state internally collects this data. But it's definitely not in the same, comparing apples to apples, and maybe they're measuring different things. So hard to measure.
Great reporting, great data, so thank you, appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Can Margo send us that presentation or have it?
I was going to ask her.
Yeah,
to do the same
please,
thing.
I've been here taking pictures, but it sure would be nice to have that in a format that we can forward.
Just make one additional comment. We got that book yesterday that, it gives us all kind of facts and everything. And a lot of us that, from time to time, speak to civic clubs about the commission, that kind of stuff. This is just really great information to be passed to the general public that most people don't know. And I don't know if this is still good, but at one time, I know years ago, there were 85% of the population of the state as an agency didn't even know we existed. But left for what our mission, what it is we do and accomplish. So anytime we have an opportunity to kind of educate the general public, and especially the impact we're having, I think it's critically important to our mission of what we do.
Yeah, because I think my memory was in the long session last year, we were using data from like 2017 and having to kind of interpolate it versus
That's
this
how we
format is so much more professional, easy to use. It's not so much that
This
it
is
overwhelms.
This is good stuff.
Good stuff.
Would the describe that others see that trout fishing had a significantly greater economic impact?
No, sir, it was not a surprise at all. Just think we had trout, what if we had, has anybody thought about having trophy trout? What is helping?
I think that's a great idea.
That's why we're spending 30 billion on the fish hatchery. Yes, sir.
I like to compare it to the amount of revenue that's brought in by sporting activities, ACC sports, youth sports, et cetera. You get these people that are hunters, that are golfers and tennis players, et cetera. They got no clue what the economic impact is of hunting and fishing, and it dwarfs what's spent on sports.
That'd be an interesting exercise.
It would.
It should be available to tourists. You would do that at some point in time.
And probably the main, sporting clay ranges, stuff where people are perfected in their.
That actually was my question. Have you captured any information about like shooting ranges and sporting clay ranges? Is that in here anywhere?
Big economic study on we've done surveys, and I know
Mark and I just made a comment to one another, when you see these numbers, is where we're at, not motorized. That's what passed, you need to put into place in the conservation path to support this kind of economic impact. This is not a affirmation of why we need to do that, to support the facilities like Commissioner Ruffin pointed out, to support general fund activities, specific infrastructure improvements to support these. There's clearly there's way more economic benefit return than what we're asking to get through. So I think this is gonna be very good to go to legislature with, as you pointed out. So we.
And I've said final point that I would have is if they were to ask me more specifically, wildlife watching, what is that money spent on? Is where I would be weakest in trying to explain how that generates, if it's traveling to state parks or.
That's, they got that, she can provide that, what that is. We'll have that.
Just in case they ask about that, with it being such a big number, a little more knowledge on that would be great.
Any further comments or questions? Good report, John.
Obviously, you can't track everything that happens, but is there an assumed multiplier? Okay, we spend it, I mean, I spend this much money on hunting licenses and on boots and whatever else, and now it does trickle down, but you can't track everything like that. Is you assume, okay, if I spend $1 here, it trickles down to 5 times, or what, is there a number there?
Software called This is data from the Bureau of Economic Affairs. And they're the ones that track that part of the equation. So we put with the data that we collect into the model, they use that data looking at tax revenue, like how different industries connect with each other, and all that comes together and spits out.
So any further questions? If you remember also, it might be good to pull the study we did a couple years ago, the value of game lands. We had that presentation like within the last 2 years, is that correct? How something like that, a little over, that had the economic data on what game lands bring, what they mean to local communities, where they exist. That'd be another thing to send out along with this, if you don't mind doing that.
And also, and that didn't we also show the economic impact whenever we opened up a boat ramp within 5 miles, the number of either boat purchases or whatever, there was some amount of data
Never seen that, but we'll.
that we had at some point.
Take a look. Anything else? Okay, we'll move forward to land and water access. This is the part of the meeting, folks, and you know, from yesterday, we had a lot of complex issues on no wake zones, various different issues, where some got approved, some didn't get approved. Watch what we can work with. I've worked with staff on overnight, what they've done a great job. They have condensed everything that we talked about yesterday and have put exhibits together so we can do one motions for the same approvals and denials. So we don't have to do them all individually for the sake of time. So when they finish with a recommendation, I'll read the motion to make sure we've got the right exhibits, the right approval, the right denial. Then I'll ask for a motion that should speed the process and make it a lot less confusing. With that being said, floor is yours, Ben.
Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everybody. We have one land and property matter for today. It is Exhibit C. Exhibit C is the Greens Thoroughfare Tract. This is a 346 acre tract in Craven County, just outside of Vanceboro. This will be in addition to the Neuse River Game Land. Staff and the Land Acquisition and Property Committee recommend approval of Exhibit C.
You got a motion, you got a recommendation for a motion and second for approval of Exhibit C. Tom Berry, got a second? Second from Ray Clifton. Got a motion and second to approve Exhibit C, Greens Thoroughfare in Craven County. Any further comments and deliberation? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, motion carries. Now we get to the rulemaking part of it, we're voting second. Betsy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, commissioners and staff. This morning, we have several exhibits for your consideration. First, as discussed in the Boating Safety Committee meeting yesterday on July 24th, staff recommends adoption of amendments for 2 no-wake zones in the town of Surf City, in Topsail Sound and Topsail Creek, east of the Highway 210 Surf City Bridge. And at the same time, we recommend adoption of incorporation into the North Carolina Administrative Code for boating access areas in Pender County. Exhibit D2.
At this time, I'll ask for a motion and a second to approve exhibit D2 as recommended. So moved. Motion by Haslett, second by Hall. Any further comments?
So you said just D2 or?
It's just D2. We're gonna take them individually. D2. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Exhibit 2 is approved. Okay. Brunswick County, Town of Sunset Beach.
Thank you. This next recommendation is for the town of Sunset Beach, as well as technical corrections to the Brunswick County rule. This is a recommendation from staff after the Boating Safety Committee meeting to deny exhibits E1 and E2, which are applications for rulemaking by the town of Sunset Beach for no wake zones in a portion of Fox Creek between 28th and 40th Street, and denial of exhibit E3 fiscal note for the town of Sunset Beach at those two locations. And at the same time, staff recommends approval of exhibit E4, which was added after yesterday's meeting to capture technical corrections to the Brunswick County Rule 15A in CAC 10F0305 that was incorporated into exhibits E1 and E2 yesterday.
Okay, at this time, I'll accept the motion. Second, to deny exhibits E1, E2, and E3, and approve exhibit E4 as recommended by the Voting Safety. Motion approved. So moved. Motion. Commissioner Craig, second. Commissioner Hall, if there's any further comment, consideration debate. Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion to deny E1, E2, E3, and approve E4 signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. Next, we have Carteret County. As discussed yesterday in the Voting Safety Committee meeting, staff recommends commission denial of an application from Carteret County for rulemaking to create a no-wake zone at Raymond's Gut in Pelletier, Exhibit F1, and recommend approval to publish notice of text with open comment period and public hearing to incorporate 10 Carteret County boating access areas into the North Carolina Administrative Code. That's Exhibit F2.
And at this time, I'll ask for a motion and a second to deny exhibit F1 and approve exhibit 2, again as recommended by the Voting Safety. Now the motion. So moved. Motion, Commissioner Craig, is there a second? Second, Commissioner Hall. Any further comments, questions, deliberation? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion to deny exhibit F1, approve exhibit F2, signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Move forward.
Thank you. Alexander County, staff recommends approval to publish notice of text with an open comment period and public hearing for a restricted area at the request of Duke Energy LLC at the Wittenberg Access Area on Lake Hickory in Bethlehem in Alexander County, Exhibit G1, and approval to publish notice of text with open comment period and public hearing to extend the no-wake zone on Lake Hickory in Taylorsville that begins at the Rink Dam and extends southeast, ending within 50 yards of the new docks at the Sandbar Marina and Grill. And lastly, to incorporate into the NCAC the Dusty Ridge Boating Access Area in Taylorsville and the Wittenberg Boating Access Area in Bethlehem, Exhibit G2.
This time I'll accept a motion and a second to approve exhibits G1, G2 as recommended by staff and the Voting Safety Committee.
So moved.
Move from Landon Zimmer, is there a second? Second, Wes Seegers. Any further comment? Discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion second to approve exhibits G1 and G2 as presented, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Forward to Lake Wiley.
Next, we have, as discussed in the Boating Safety Committee meeting yesterday, staff recommends commission approval for the application from the Lake Wiley Marine Commission under 15A NCAC to publish a notice of text with an open comment period and public hearing to create a no-wake zone within 50 yards of Joiners Marina, adjacent to the no-wake zone east of the Buster Boyd Bridge, Exhibit H1, and that also extends eastward to include the entire cove where Joiners Marina is located. Also, requests approval to publish notice of text for technical corrections to the rule that will replace the South Carolina coordinate that appears in the NC now for the eastern side of the Buster Boyd Bridge and replace it with a point for the Buster Boyd Bridge in North Carolina, and to strike from the NCAC other facilities and marked swimming and mooring areas listed within that rule. That is Exhibit H4. Further, staff recommends commission denial of the application from Lake Wiley Marine Commission to extend the no-wake zone around the west side of Sadler Island in Mecklenburg and Gaston counties, Exhibit H2, and recommends commission denial of the application from the Lake Wiley Marine Commission for a no-wake zone in the waters north and east of Sunset Island in Lake Wiley.
At this time, I accept a motion and a second to approve exhibits H1 and H4 and deny exhibits H2 and H3 as recommended by staff and the Voting Safety Committee. Motion.
So moved.
Motion. And Zimmer, second by Tom Hastings. Any further comments, deliberation? If not, all those in favor for the motion to approve exhibits H1 and H4 and deny H2 and H3, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Betsy.
Exhibit O.
Okay.
All right. This was discussed in the Boating Safety Committee meeting yesterday, and you'll recall that you recently approved amendments to White Lake in Bladen County. Now staff requests approval to publish notice of emergency rulemaking and temporary rulemaking with a comment period and public hearing under 15A NCAC 10F.0304 Bladen County at White Lake that will revise the amendment to require motorboats to travel perpendicular to the shore and at no wake speed within the restricted area at White Lake, Exhibit O.
Okay, at this time, I accept the motion and second to approve exhibit O recommended by staff and the Public Safety Committee for this adoption of temporary permanent rulemaking notice of text. Is there a motion and a second? Motion, Commissioner Clifton, second by Commissioner Alexander. Were there any further comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor of the approval of exhibit O, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Now we'll go to recognize medical panelists. Rulemaking notes of text and rulemaking the document. Now, here again, I'll ask Sue for motion and second after they completed their recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. The first rulemaking item on the agenda today is to notice the rules in subchapters 10G and 10J, Exhibit I, which includes 10G 0501 license requirements, 10J 0103 hunting and wildlife conservation areas, 10J 0104 fishing and wildlife conservation areas. These rules were determined to be necessary with substantial public interest and are required to be readopted as part of the periodic review. At this time, staff requests approval to notice the rules in subchapters 10G and 10J to open a 60-day public comment period and to hold one public hearing as presented at yesterday's Committee of the Whole.
This time I accept the motion second for adoption and approval of exhibit I. Motion. A, second by Kohler. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those likewise, motion carried. Okay. Yep.
Second rulemaking item on the agenda today is for the adoption of the amendments to the 10I0100 Endangered and Threatened Species section, exhibits J1 and J2, which includes 10I0102, Protection of Endangered, Threatened, Special Concern, 10I0103, Endangered Species Listed, 10I0104, Threatened Species Listed, 10I0105, Special Concern Species Listed, For 10I-0102, it was determined to be necessary with substantive public interest and is required to be readopted as part of the periodic review. Amendments were made to clarify requirements and conditions. For 10I-0102, 10I-0104, and 10I-0105, the proposed rule language includes several name changes, technical edits, and 8 species listing changes. At this time, staff recommends the permanent adoption of 10I-0100 endangered and threatened species rules as presented at yesterday's committee of the whole.
This time I'll entertain a second motion for adoption approval of exhibit J2.
So moved.
So moved, Landon Zimmer, second. Ray Cliff, is there any further comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor of adoption of exhibit J2, signify by saying aye. Opposed, motion carries. Bill?
Third rulemaking item on the agenda today is for the adoption of the permanent amendments to the land and water access rules for 2024-2025 deer season, exhibits K1 and K2, which includes 10D-0209, Buffalo Cove Game Land in Caldwell and Wilkes counties, 10D-0243, Kings Creek Game Land in Caldwell and Wilkes counties, 10D-0276, South Mountains Game Land in Burke, Cleveland, McDowell, and Rutherford County. The proposed amendments to these rules are necessary to reflect the newly adopted framework for the 2024 annual cycle wildlife management deer rule. At this time, staff recommends the permanent adoption of the land and water access rules for the 2024 deer season rules as presented at yesterday's committee of the whole.
At this time, I ask for a motion and second adoption approval exhibit K2. Second, David Paul, second, Ron Coley. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed.
Rulemaking item on the agenda today is for the adoption of the rules in the 10H1800 commercial activity permitting section, exhibits L1 and L2, which includes 10H1801 general requirements and fees, 10H1802 commercial use permits, 10H1803 event permits. Due to the increase in demand for access and the impact of large user groups, there is a need to regulate and to track the use of commission property by organized entities. At this time, staff recommends a permanent adoption of 10H1800 commercial activity permitting rules as presented at yesterday's committee of the whole.
At this time, I entertain a motion and second adoption approval of exhibit L2 is presented. Motion second from Paul. Any further comment or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of adoption. Motion to approve exhibit L2, signify by saying aye. Opposed, motion carries. Okay. One more, right?
Yes, sir. The fifth and the last rulemaking item that I will present today is for the adoption of the temporary rule amendments to 10D-0252 Needmore Game Land and Macon and Swing counties, exhibits M1 and M2. Proposed amendments to these rules are necessary to reflect the newly adopted 2024-2025 annual cycle of wildlife management hunting seasons framework. The rule text in today's presentation has been modified from yesterday's presentation at the committee of the whole. The new rule text now states the no antlerless deer shall be taken during the deer with visible antler season. At this time, staff recommends the adoption of the temporary amendments to 10D-0252 Needmore Game Land and Macon and Swing counties as presented at today's business meeting.
Entertain a motion and second for the adoption of exhibit M2 is presented. Alford, second. Alexander. All those in favor of adopting exhibit M2, signify by saying aye. Opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Melvin. Yes, we got through all that pretty smooth. Lots of movement we did yesterday. Oh my God. Christian Waters, temporary rulemaking, Flounder.
Good morning, everyone. I will be presenting today exhibits on temporary rules for flounder. Exhibit N1 is the public comment, which was provided yesterday during the committee of the whole. Exhibit N2 actually contains the rule text. The rule text was modified based on the discussions yesterday in the committee of the whole to clarify those changes. The season now would be a 4-day season. So that would include Sunday, September 1, Monday, September 2nd, Saturday, September 7th, and Sunday, September 8th. And during that time period, there would be one fish daily creel limit and a 15-inch minimum size limit. Staff recommend the adoption of the temporary amendment to the flounder rule as presented in the modified N2.
At this time, I'll consider a motion and second for the adoption and approval of exhibit N2 as presented by Christian. So moved. Motion, is there a second? Second. Second, Commissioner Craig. Motion by Commissioner Seegers. If there's any comments or discussion, deliberation on this matter? Hearing none, all those in favor of the adoption, approval of exhibit N2, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Christian. Okay, we've gone through that pretty well. Thank you all for your patience and going through a lengthy agenda, particularly at the upper, where we know most of this stuff is needed out, but yesterday was a little bit of a stress. But we have it all cleaned up, done today. Thank you for your patience and getting it done today. I just have a couple items, comments by the chairman. One is on July the 19th, we had our 60th law enforcement graduation ceremony. We graduated 18, Mark, is that right? 18 new wildlife officers. We had several commissioners attend. If you, as a commissioner, if you've never been to a law enforcement graduation, I think Tommy, all y'all would agree, they're great services. And you see the professionalism and dedication of our wildlife enforcement staff, not only the excellent training they get from our existing staff. I hear constantly and others hear constantly about the professionalism, type officers, the one that we choose, that we train, and we put in the field are second to none to anybody in the country. And I firmly believe that. And I think if you attend one of these graduation ceremonies and see what goes into them and learn a little bit about it, I think you'd agree with me as well. And Mark, I don't mean to put you in the spot, and I should have asked before I started these comments, but how many applicants do we have this year?
For the next academy,
No, for the academy that just graduated.
around 1,200.
So we have 1,200 applicants. And so when I made the statement about the best in the country, and when you got law enforcement agencies around this country that are starved for people to go to work for them, you've got 1,200 people that want to be a North Carolina wildlife enforcement officer. And that says a lot in and of itself, in my opinion, about the dedication and the professionalism of this organization. Mark, Colonel, Phil, all y'all staff. That's all. So, and one particular, I want to highlight one, and I had the opportunity to go down with Cam. We made 2 visits, spoke to the class on behalf of the commission. And in the graduation ceremonies, they always notify, recognize the best driver, the best shooter. So they have a competition in the class of itself, but they also give an award for the highest GPA. We had a young lady in this year's class who lived in Maine. She was a resident of Maine, and she decided she wanted to be a wildlife officer in North Carolina. She came down here on her own time, flew down here once or twice, visited with wildlife officers, made sure this is what she wanted to do as a career. She applied, she made the cut, and she graduated #1 in class. So that's just to have an organization that attracts that folks from Maine. And if you look at the list, there are multiple folks that we hired and moved to North Carolina and lived out of state. And so it's just a testimony to professionalism, this division. And it also goes to show what Samarkand, the new building there, is going to add to what we put in the field in law enforcement officers from this agency. It's something every one of us would be proud of. It's a $10, $11 million investment. This way it was without a doubt. So I just wanted to highlight that. The next thing is we had a great visit Tuesday afternoon. For those that made it up, I know you saw what's going on is very encouraging at the Yates Mill Aquatic Conservation Center. We're doing all kind of work, fish and mussels, similar to what they're doing in Marion. And so that's here again, that's another outstanding project with our partner at NC State University. where we work in cooperation with them, with our staff, where they can coordinate these species, what are the needs are in the field, the research that needs to be done to save, promulgate, or all the fancy terms that I don't understand, Rachel. I'm sorry, I can repeat them, but fortunately, we have folks like you and a great staff that gets all of that. And Kelly, I know you do too, as well, it's all the understanding. But it's, but that's also to see those facilities, just another example of the partnership that we have. So that was a good tour. Also, Cam's wife Renee's surgery is happening at 3 o'clock. Keep her in your thoughts of prayer. And no further business, meeting adjourned.